Okay, hi everyone. Thank you for joining our webinar on how to make better decisions. I'm Johanna Scholz. I'm a business psychologist at Thrive, and today I have Alyssa with me, who's also a business psychologist. Hi, Alyssa.
Hi everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, great. Just to let you know, this webinar will be recorded and a link will be sent to you at the end of this session. And it will last approximately like 50 minutes with a 10 minutes Q&A in the end. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box. And if you have any comments, please use the chat function. We will get to them in the end of the session. Today we will talk about how to make more objective and deliberate decisions. In this webinar, we will be focusing on what drives us to make these decisions in our daily lives from a behavioral and social perspective. Taking into consideration heuristics, schemas, and biases. And by understanding how these are formed and how they influence us, we will be able to make more conscious decisions. So how do we make decisions? We might be inclined to believe that having conscious control of our decision making is always a good thing. However, this like automatic and parallel processing of information can save our lives and actually reduce cognitive overload during our daily life, and more information is processed much faster in this process. So you might have heard of Daniel Kahneman before. He's a psychologist and economist who is known for his work in judgment and decision making. And he has written a book named Thinking Fast and Slow, and which you might have come across or read it already. So he suggested that there are two systems involved in decision making. So the first one is the system one, which is the automatic, really fast system, which is based on all the associations stored in memory, such as, for example, heuristics, schema, biases, which we will touch upon later. This system does not work through all the available information systematically, but just rather focuses on some informations that we deem as important from what we have learned from the past experiences, and just makes quick decisions based on this limited but important information. And as I said before, this automatic parallel processing is sometimes there to really save our lives. For example, it's what makes us swerve in order to avoid an accident, or but the problem with this system that it often leads to biases and poor decision making. So the system two is the deliberate, rather slow decision-making process, during which all the available information is taken into consideration and is just logically worked through step by step in order to come to a conclusion in the end, or to make a decision. So this system can result in better and more logical decisions being made. However, here the problem to our cognitive limitations, or just sometimes laziness, we tend to rely on system two to system one more frequently. So this especially happens when we are tired or fatigued and stressed, or multitasking as well. What else needs to be taken into consideration here is that we often have to decide on an issue when we do not have access to complete information. So this brings me to heuristics. Often when we make quick decisions, we rely on so-called mental shortcuts that have worked in the past. And before I continue, I would like to do a small experiment with you, which we have prepared in the polling system. So one moment, please.
Yeah, I've launched the poll just now.
Yeah. So just a small poll. If there's a vowel printed on one side of the card, then an even numbers printed on the other side. You see a set of cards labeled A, K, 2 and 7, and please choose only the cards that need to be flipped in order to see if the rule holds. So just curious what you think is right here. This is an experiment which is often used in psychology or in lectures around psychology.
Yeah, we have around 32% of participants who voted now, just leaving a little bit more time for some people to read through and take the time to answer.
Great.
Yeah, we have around 50% who answered now. Oh, somebody said that they can't see the polls. Let me see if I can copy paste this. Oh, no, I can't copy paste it. Sorry.
Wait, I will try to. One moment, maybe I can do that. Maybe you can see it now. Yeah, in the chat function. So I think we will finish the poll here.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll show the answers.
Yeah. Very interesting to see. So yeah, the answer is actually only A and 7 needs to be flipped. The rule says nothing about what's on the other side of the consonant, so the K. And 2 card also doesn't provide any anything. It cannot disconfirm the rule, as the rule doesn't restrict what's on the other side of an even card. So the only way to falsify, for example, if X then Y, so the statement here, if a vowel then even number, is by finding an instance of X and not Y, so the vowel and odd number. So the K and 2 are irrelevant here, because those cards or these cards cannot combine a vowel and odd numbers. So the most common is often this like A and 2, which we can see here too. And most of us choose the cards capable of confirming the statement rather than disconfirming it. So this tendency, which we will touch on later, is about confirmation bias. And yeah, this is why this is just a really famous experiment to show our way how we think if we do those choices. So now I will continue. So they help us to make, obviously those heuristics help us to make judgments quickly and efficiently. These rules of thumb strategies or heuristics shorten decision-making time and allow us to act without thinking about every single step or the next course of action, for example. And yeah, I mean, if you had to think about every possible options when making a decision, for example, it would take us a lot of time to even make like simplest choices in our daily life. So this is why we have them, because of the like sheer complexity of the world around you and the amount of information in the environment coming in every minute. It's necessary sometimes to rely on those like mental shortcuts to allow us to act quickly. As you can see, heuristics can make our life much easier in various ways, but they can also lead us to make mistakes or misjudge situations. So here I will outline 3 common mental shortcuts which you might feel familiar with. First of all, there's the representativeness heuristic. So this involves judging the probability of an event based upon how similar it is to our existing prototype of such an event. And yeah, as an example, gamblers often judge the probability that they will win the next game based whether they won the last game, based on whether they won the last game. And in reality, obviously, the games are not dependent upon each other, and winning or losing is, yeah, just entirely up to chance. Then there is the availability heuristic. So this involves judging the likelihood of an event based upon how quickly we can recall similar events to mind. So thereby we tend to kind of overestimate the probability and likelihood of similar things happening in the future. So here thinking about like you might believe that plane crashes are more common than they really are, simply because you can just quickly think of several examples of airplane accidents you heard or read in the news about, and the news can be quite big about them. Finally, there's the affect heuristic. So this one involves making choices that are influenced by the emotions that an individual is experiencing at the moment. So for example, research has shown that people who are more likely to see decisions as having benefits and low risk when they are in a positive mood, and on the other side, negative emotions lead people to focus on the potential downsides of a decision, and rather than on the possible benefits of the event. So as mentioned before, these heuristic also have the downsides, and they can contribute to things such as stereotypes and prejudice, and because people use mental shortcuts to classify and categorize events or people, they often overlook more relevant information and create stereotype categorizations that are not in tune with reality at all. So now I will hand over to Elissa, who has a nice experiment for you too.
Yeah, so thank you, Johanna. I hope you can all see this picture. It's quite old, it's in black and white because it's an old experiment. I couldn't find a more recent one, but I would just like you to view this picture for a little bit of time. All right, now I have another poll for you that I'm going to bring up. Just going to bring it up. Here we go. So it should pop up on your screens again. So what do you recall in the picture? So choose as many as you can recall, as many items as you can recall. Is it a typewriter, a skull, a coffee pot, books, desk, picnic basket, telephone, chair? I'm going to give some time for people to answer this.
Yeah, also inserted the question or the poll into the chat function for people who cannot see the poll.
Yeah, we have around 70% of people who answered. Just going to give a little bit more time. All right, I'm going to end the poll here and share the results. So yeah, a schema is a mental representation that helps us to understand and predict the world that we live in. As we navigate through the world around us, we are constantly changing these schemas by modifying them with new information, or we change information in order to fit into our existing schemas. So this is exactly what we tried to test before with this famous office experiment. Many participants usually remember books and a telephone within the room. However, I do understand that the picture wasn't maybe super clear, so that could be a problem here. But but the point is that a lot of people remember books and a telephone within the room. However, there really was none. And this is because our existing schema of an office room usually has books and a telephone in it. So while the unusual objects such as a skull and a picnic basket, as you can see in the results as well, are not remembered as well because they do not fit into our schema of what an office should have in it or what an office should look like. So this is just a quick illustration and another example of our mental shortcuts that our brain constantly takes in order for us to not to be overloaded with information. However, this can often lead to errors and misinterpretations, or even remembering things that were never actually there. So this then brings us to cognitive biases, which can often result in errors in judgment as well as decision making. So a cognitive bias is a systematic error in thinking that occurs when people are processing and interpreting information in the world around them and affects the decision and judgment that they make. So the human brain is powerful, but it does have its limitations. So cognitive biases are often a result of your brain attempting to simplify information processing. Biases often work as a rule of thumb that helps us to make sense of the world and make decisions faster. Some of these biases are related to memory. These can be positive or negative memories encountered throughout our lifetime. For example, traumatic events during childhood can teach us that certain places, objects, or people may be a threat to us. Therefore, our bias is to perceive this as a threat to us in the future, unless this bias is challenged and disconfirmed either through new experiences or through therapy. Or positive experiences teach us to prefer one thing over another. For example, when we see certain things or eat certain foods that give us this nostalgic feeling or bring back good memories, we tend to want to relive those experiences. So we are biased to prefer these things over others, which we might not be so familiar with. But since we haven't even tried something else, we may actually never know what we could be missing out on. Other cognitive biases might be related to problems with attention. Since attention is a limited resource, people have to be selective about what they pay attention to in the world around them. Because of this, subtle biases can creep in and really influence the way you see and think about the world around you. The concept of a cognitive bias was first introduced by researchers Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman in 1972. And since then, researchers have described a number of different types of biases that affect decision-making in a wide range of areas, including social behavior, cognition, behavioral economics, education, management, healthcare, businesses, finances. Basically, every part of our life is influenced by these biases that we can think of. But before we talk about all the different biases that really influence us, I will quickly discuss how we can detect our own biases and what signs we can look out for. So everyone has cognitive biases. Some might be easier to spot than others, and this depends on a lot of things, such as our upbringing, previous experiences, culture, social norms, and so on. It's important to have awareness of our own biases so that we can make healthier and more informed decisions. Some signs that you might be influenced by some type of cognitive bias include only paying attention to news stories that confirm your opinions, blaming outside factors when things don't go your way, attributing other people's success to luck but taking personal credit for your own accomplishments, assuming that everyone else shares the same opinions or beliefs, learning a little bit about a topic and then assuming that you know everything there is to know about this topic. When we are making judgments and decisions about the world around us, we like to think that we are objective, logical, and capable of taking in and evaluating all the information that is available to us. But as said before, and as we tested in that experiment before with disconfirming our hypothesis with the even and odd numbers, but as said, so We do not have all the information available to us or the cognitive resources to be able to go through all this information as quickly as possible. So we rely on these heuristics and schemas and biases to make quicker decisions. Unfortunately, these sometimes can trip us up, leading to poor decision-making and bad judgments. An example of when decision-making can go wrong is the phenomenon of groupthink. This can happen both in our personal lives and at work, as we tend to prefer surrounding ourselves with like-minded people. However, importantly, when this happens at work, often the consequences and stakes could be much higher or detrimental, as they don't just impact ourselves. When a group is highly cohesive and guards themselves from outside opinions or views, this can often lead to the group adopting the illusion of invulnerability. They tend to rationalize warnings about certain choices being harmful. They start stereotyping by having this in-group and out-group mentality, and they pressure each other towards conformity through self-censorship and exerting direct pressure on those whose views goes against their own. There are many real-life examples of this, such as the Space Shuttle Challenger, where despite warnings from engineers about some concerns regarding the mechanics of the space shuttle, NASA chose to ignore the warnings in order to avoid postponing the launch of the shuttle. They believed that their initial testing was proof enough to support the working of the Challenger. And unfortunately, NASA was wrong, and within minutes of liftoff, the space shuttle got destroyed and killed all 7 members who were on board. Or another example in business is Swissair, once being known as the flying bank due to its high commercial success, becoming a victim of groupthink when they were convinced of their own morality and invulnerability. They fired many of their advisors and authorities and board members who had knowledge about certain fields, took harsh decisions, and which eventually led them to bankruptcy and dissolution of the company. And now I will hand back to Johanna, who will talk a little bit more about different types of biases that we have.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Elissa. So yeah, there are various different biases which we have to be aware of. So now we will touch upon a number of these biases that can distort our thinking. Having awareness of these biases can then help us to understand our own decision better and be the first step to making more conscious and informed decisions. So the first one I would like to touch on is anchoring. So this bias is the tendency to jump to conclusions. That is to base your final judgment on information gained early in the decision-making process. So think of this as a kind of like first impression bias. Once you form an initial picture of a situation, it's hard to see other possibilities. And being influenced by this bias can influence how much we are willing to pay for something or influence our salary negotiations. So we might feel uncomfortable to put a number on the table for a salary increase, but actually the first offer has the edge, as this number will be the starting point of all the following negotiations. So this is maybe something you want to consider in your next negotiation. Then the next one is overconfidence bias. This happens when we place too much faith in our own knowledge and opinion. And we may also believe that our contribution to a decision is more valuable than it actually is. For example, entrepreneurs can easily be affected by this bias. So they can fail or sometimes fail to spot the limits to the knowledge. So they perceive less risk. Some succeed in their ventures, but actually many do not. And this is something which we don't realize because we only see those who succeed, right? Attentional bias then. This is the tendency to pay attention to some things while obviously simultaneously ignoring others. So just think about like a decision you made lately. Did you consider all the possibilities? While we might not think that we take all the alternatives into consideration, the reality is that we often yeah, just overlook some options and possible outcomes here. And in some cases, our attention becomes focused on just a few of the options while we completely ignore the rest. And this is like a tunnel vision, which can help us in dangerous situations to only focus on escaping, for example, the threat. But in daily life, this can have a dramatic impact on our decision-making process and our memory, leading us to make, for example, inaccurate decisions or choices when, for example, being an eyewitness during a trial. Then there's the actor-observer bias. So this is the tendency to attribute your own actions to external causes while attributing other people's behavior to internal causes. And this is quite interesting. So for example, when watching a movie, we observe an actor acting as a villain, we tend to forget that this person is acting and might start attributing these characteristics to the person outside of the role as well. Believing these behaviors are their own and not what they are reading of a script, for example. And so another example for this bias is that we tend to attribute, for example, high cholesterol level to genetics, while you consider others to have a high level due to, for example, poor diet or lack of exercise. And yeah, this is just another example here. Then there's the confirmation bias. So we touched upon that before. Confirmation bias happens when we look for information that supports our existing beliefs and yeah, just reject data that go against what we believe. And unfortunately, this type of bias can prevent us from looking at situations really objectively, and it can also influence the decision we make and lead to poor or faulty choices. So yeah, thinking about an example here, during an election season, people tend to seek for positive information that paints, like just supports the favorite candidate or puts them in a good light, while they will also look for, or we will look for information that kind of casts the opposing candidate in a negative light by not looking out for objective facts. Interpreting information in a way that only supports existing beliefs and only remembering details that just uphold these beliefs. We often miss those important information or those objective informations which might have otherwise influenced our decision, and maybe would influence how we make decisions or we would vote, for example. Then there's the false consensus effect. This is the tendency to overestimate how much other people agree with us. So an example here is that this effect includes the overestimation of the number of people who think that, for example, saving the planet is important because, yeah, for example, you think this or I think that way, or that all couples dream of having children at some point in their life because, yeah, you might think that way, but maybe they don't. So this is an example of false consensus effect. Then there's the functional fixedness, and I think this is quite interesting too. This is the tendency to see objects as only work in a particular way. For example, if you don't have a hammer, you never consider a big wrench can also be used to drive a nail into the wall, for example, or this could extend to people's functions, such as not realizing that a personal assistant has skills to be a leadership role, for example. Then we have framing. Framing is the context in which choices are presented. So, for example, if half of you were faced with the choice to undergo a surgery where a doctor tells you that the survival rate is 90%, while the other half of you was given the choice to have surgery where the mortality rate is 10%. I believe the former group would be more likely to do the surgery, even though the situation is completely the same, right? So this is due to people or us favoring gains over losses. And if we are faced with two equal options and one being framed as gain, or the like in the surgery framed as just as a survival rate. And the other, while with a loss in the surgery example, then we tend to pick the former to avoid any losses at all, although the situation is the same. So this is quite interesting, I think. Then there's the sunk cost. We struggle to consider the odds that an investment would produce a positive return, and tend to kind of throw good money after bad and continue investing in projects with poor prospects that have already consumed significant resources of us. And this is partly because we want to avoid the feeling of regret, and so we put more and more money in there, even though we had this like bad experience before. Then there is halo effect. You might have heard about that, especially in recruitment settings. So your overall impression of a person is influenced how you feel and think about their character. This especially applies to physical attractiveness, influencing how you rate their other qualities. So in recruitment, this might have significant influence on decisions. And fortunately, the UK implemented the policy not to include pictures in the CV. Because this might reduce the risk of this halo effect at this point of recruitment stage. And I know in other countries it's not happening. So I think this is a good way to at least reduce the halo effect at this point of recruitment stage. Then there's misinformation effect. So this is the tendency for post-event information to interfere with the memory of the original event. So it is easy to have your memory influenced by what you hear about the event from others. Knowledge of this effect has led to mistrust of eyewitness information, because obviously this can lead to very harmful, powerful decision making. Okay, then we have optimism bias. So we're nearly on the end of the list. Optimism bias. This bias leads you to believe that you're less likely to suffer from misfortune and more likely to attain success than your peers, for example. And an example here are smokers. Sometimes they believe that they are less likely to suffer from negative health effects than other smokers. So this is a bias which might be quite present there. Then there's self-serving bias. So this is the tendency to blame external forces when bad things happen. And I think Elissa mentioned that before, and give yourself credit when good things happen. And for example, when you win a poker hand, it's due to your skills at reading the other player and knowing the odds. But when you lose, it's due to getting dealt a poor hand, for example. So as you can see, we are influenced by various heuristics and biases in our daily life, which influence our decision thinking, and many of these biases serve as an adaptive purpose, like allowing us to reach decisions quickly. But how can we overcome those biases and make better decisions? And we learned a bit about that before, but I will give you some additional tips for overcoming cognitive biases and how to make better decisions. So one key factor to make these better or more deliberate decisions is being aware of these biases. And I think this is a really big key factor here. Try to consider how biases influence your thinking and decisions in your daily life. Just reflect on that and consider the factors that influence your decisions. Are there factors such as overconfidence or self-interest at play? Think about really all the influences on your decision may help you, thinking about those influences help you to make better choices too. And if you notice that there are factors influencing your choices, focus on kind of actively challenging your biases. What are some factors that you have missed? Are you giving too much weight to certain factors? Are you ignoring relevant information because it doesn't support your view maybe? just think about these things and challenge your biases. Can make you more critical. Can you make you a more critical thinker and more help you to make more deliberate decisions in the end. So just as an example here, think about how you could avoid being affected by anchoring. So anchoring may happen if you feel under pressure to make quick decisions, or if you have a general tendency to act hastily. So to avoid it, reflect on your decision-making history here and think about whether you rushed to a judgment in the past. Then, yeah, just make time to make decisions more slowly, and be ready to ask for more time if you feel under pressure, for example, at work, or to make, to just take your time to make this decision and consider the different factors here, and try not to rush to an immediate decision here. If you realize this might influence then your decision-making process. And if we think about the confirmation bias, for example, look for ways to challenge what you think you see. So you could seek out for information from a range of sources. So not only focusing on one channel or only focusing on one group, but try to be just as broad as possible. For example, alternatively, you could discuss your thoughts with others, surround yourself with a diverse group of people, and really don't be afraid to listen to dissenting views. So be open to to opposing views too, not just block yourself and think, your view is the only right one. So be aware of that and allow others to have different views and discuss them. You can also seek out people and information that challenge your opinions, or assign, for example, in the work setting, someone on your team to play like the devil's advocate for major decisions, to help you to really challenge those major decisions here. And a final example, if you want to avoid overconfidence bias in a significant decision, you could consider some of the questions like, what source of information do you tend to rely on when you make the decision? Are these fact-based, or do you rely on hunches, or who else is involved in gathering those informations? Has information been gathered systematically? And if you suspect that you might be depending on potential unreliable information here, think about that you can do what you can do to gather more comprehensive and objective data. So try to do that. And as a final superpower, you may also want to learn cognitive behavior skills. These help you to stop and think where you would usually just jump to conclusions, or where your attention is captured by automatic thoughts. So CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, will allow you to figure out if there's evidence for your thoughts, and just most importantly, if there's evidence against your thoughts, to assess the accuracy of that initial thought in light of the evidence. So this will allow you to challenge your schemas, heuristics, and biases, and help you to make just more objective decisions and helpful thinking here. So this brings me to the end, actually. We have a short recap here. So we touched on various things. The first system, like the system 1 and system 2, one, the automatic fast one, system 2, the deliberate slow one. Then we learned about heuristics, so those mental shortcuts, which are those mental just with various options there. Then we learned about schemas from Melissa, mental representations of the world around us. And we learned about all those cognitive biases, which are systematic errors in thinking that which affect our decision-making process, and tips to overcome these biases, and how to make better decisions in the end. So I hope this was informative for you, and if you have any questions for us now, we are happy to answer them.